We've all met this person, or maybe we've been that person ourselves, who keeps saying that they are going to do something. Maybe lose some weight, maybe they've got some career goals, maybe they've got some spiritual goals, only to find out that a month later they've gone back to the way they were living before. And it's no wonder that the highest gym membership sign-ups in the year is usually in January, because it's a new year, it's a new me, right? And I'm gonna hold my hands up and say, you know, I've been a culprit of this, or a victim of this mindset myself. But there have been other times where I've kind of managed to break out of this cycle, break out of this rut, and achieve at least a few things. And it got me thinking, what's been the difference between those times when I've been stuck in that cycle and that rut, and the times when I've managed to kind of get out. So in this video, I want to talk about two things I've learned about goal setting and ways of increasing your chance of success, ways of increasing your chance of being outside that cycle of rut. So a while back, I spent some time reading this book called The Dip by the author Seth Godin, who's known as a legend in the marketing space. But he doesn't talk about marketing in this book, at least not for the entire time. He talks about something called the dip, or this phenomenon of the dip. And in simple terms, what he says is that anything that is worth doing in life is controlled by the dip. It is life's way of putting barriers in front of things that are valuable. It's what creates scarcity. The dip filters out people, leaving behind those that can stay steadfast on what they've set out to do, can overcome those hurdles to come out on the other side better versions of themselves. This is exactly what creates the difference between mediocrity and expertise, between beginner and master, between a one-hit wonder and consistent success. And he uses this graph to describe the phenomenon of the dip. At the very beginning, you start off with a huge amount of excitement, you move at a fast pace, you experience lots of progress. But then as time goes on, you start to encounter some difficulties, and the difficulties become more difficult as time passes. And it could be difficulties like waking up early in the morning over a long period of time. It could be having to train outside in the rain. It could be that you feel a bit stuck and you're not progressing, or you need a higher amount of time in order to make the same type of progress you were making at the start. And this dip can be extremely frustrating. This is often where people tend to stop, when they are faced with the reality of the difficulties and the initial surge of motivation, excitement fades off. They enter the dip and they stay in the dip. And you know what? It might sound very simple, but what he says is that the biggest failure when it comes to the dip is not anticipating its reality, is not anticipating that it's gonna come. So what contingency plans do we make for when that time happens? Do you think that you're gonna feel like you want to wake up every morning very early? Are there not gonna be days where you feel tired? Are there not gonna be days where the weather is crap outside, but you still have to go to study, or you still have to go to the library, or you still have to go to work, or you still have to go to the gym, right? What routines have we set in place for those times? What routines have we put in place in order to reduce friction in order to achieve those goals? And for example, if you're trying to live a more healthy lifestyle and you know that you're easily enticed by your local KFC or your local chicken shop, whatever, have you, in anticipation to that, made meal preps, emergency meal preps, and stuck them in the freezer for those times when you've got no food and you feel like you were gonna go to your Subway or get your 6 wings, chips and drink? Do you get it? So what contingency plans are made in place? And that's probably the biggest issue, not anticipating that the dip will come. And that's also what I've realized in my own life. The times when I've managed to stay consistent on something, or the times when things have gone particularly well, are the times when I've had those contingency plans in place, and lots of them, in order to try and anticipate variables changing all the time, and also having a routine and kind of automating things. Those have been the times that have been the best. So for me, what I learned was to realize that the dip will come whether I like it or not, and to embrace the challenge rather than being taken out by the dip like the majority of people. So the second point is, do not tell people your goals, or don't publicize your goals. In 1982, a group of scientists, including someone called Peter Goldwitzer at the University of Texas, published some papers about the relation between the way we view ourselves and its impact on the way we display ourselves to the world. And they called or coined this thought or this theory as the self-completeness theory. Okay, so it's about to get a little bit complex, but stay with me. The theory says that we all have a self-definition, a way that we view ourselves. So for example, someone who teaches at a university or who's into science will describe themselves as a scientist, an engineer as an engineer, or a physician as a doctor. And for example, someone who tries to live a healthy lifestyle will at some point, when asked to describe themselves, say that they are into fitness, they like to eat healthily, and that's what they will say. And the theory also states that most people will try to achieve something called self-completeness. And if society around a person, or if a society around us acknowledges us in a way that we want to be viewed, it leads that person closer to self-completeness. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's out here trying to get validation from people, or you're trying to also always kind of get attention from other people. It's more like collecting evidence. So for example, if someone is trying to be more generous, and the feedback that they're getting from lots and lots of people that they meet is that they are a generous person, then the evidence would then kind of steer towards that, that's most likely what they're like. Whereas if someone is trying to be more generous, or they're not, but they'd like to view themselves as such, and most people that they meet say that, this guy out here, this brother out here, very, very stingy, then obviously there is something wrong, and there's a dichotomy between a self-definition and the way kind of society sees that person. So now fast forward to 2009, and a group of psychologists went out to perform some experiments in terms of this theory. And what they did was they took a group of psychology students and asked them to write down their study goals or their study intentions. So for example, on a piece of paper to write, I plan to study X amount of hours in this week, or I plan to complete this project, or I'm gonna write this essay, or I'm gonna do this, this and that. And then they were divided into two groups. One group wrote down their goals on a piece of paper and put it secretly into a box. The other group wrote down those goals on a piece of paper, handed it to another psychologist, who then read those goals and then stuck it into the box. So in simple terms, one group had secret goals, the other group had public goals. They were then followed up a while later and asked whether they managed to achieve the goals that they had set out to do. And the results were interesting, probably not surprising though, with the line of kind of ideas that we're going in this video. The group that had put their goals publicly, or had their goals read, were much less likely to have achieved those goals than the people who had written down their goals secretly and put it inside the box. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. How often do we see, or how often have we fallen into, when we've set a new goal, it's 2023, it's 2022, it's 2024, it's a new year, and we post our New Year resolutions, or first day in the gym, or first day in the library, or first day of my business, right? And we get this huge influx of positive feedback. People saying, oh wow, it's been a week, you look great, or wow, this thing that you're doing is amazing, right? And we get all of this positive feedback before we've even achieved what we've set out to achieve. And this is what this whole experiment explains. So if we take it back to the experiment, the people who had their goals read had essentially prematurely received positive feedback, prematurely received acknowledgement from their superiors, or their peers, other psychologists, before they had even achieved what they set out to do. And this also makes sense with the whole dopamine dopamine theory, that every time you get positive feedback, you get a surge of dopamine. And I haven't read many studies on that topic, I haven't researched it much, but it kind of seems like common knowledge. But when you publicize your goals and people give you positive feedback before you've achieved the thing, then you prematurely close the gap between your self-definition and self-completeness. And even if it's not that, then there's the whole dopamine stuff. So it makes sense to keep your goals secret, or or keep your goals to yourself and try to do what you need to do. And then only when you've kind of achieved what you've set out to do, then let other people know about it. Now, I've seen the other side of the argument where some people say, you know, if you publicize your goals, then you are more likely to be held to account by other people. And you want to save yourself the embarrassment of being kind of seeming like you're just talk and less action. But how often does that happen? How often are you actually held to account by people? How often do people come up to you and say, you know what, I saw you 6 months ago and you said you're going to do this and that. Have you actually done it? Or etc. So it would make sense that the benefits of not publicizing these things far outweighs the very minute possibility of benefit of publicizing it, the benefit of being held to account, which rarely happens, and doing something and then letting results speak for themselves. So I hope you found that video useful. If you did find it useful, then, you know, subscribe to the channel. It's been a while since I made some videos here, and yeah, follow Instagram and all that.